Hi, everyone. I am Kelly, and this is Vote Her In. Vote Her In is a collaboration between Two Broads Talking Politics and author Rebecca Sive, the author of Vote Her In, Your Guide to Electing the First Woman President. I should know this title after all this time.
Our first one.
Yes,
All
our
of
first
us.
woman president.
Right.
And this is very exciting. This is the first Vote Her In and the first Two Broads Talking Politics since the start of the new administration, with Joe Biden as president and Kamala Harris as vice president. So we are very excited about that. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Rebecca, who will introduce our guest. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Kelly. I'm thrilled to be here with you and with our guest. And as Kelly said, we're here right after the inauguration, I guess about a week later, and we're all just sort of taking it all in, I think, and what it will mean. And so we thought it would really be a good idea to invite someone who knows what it's like to be in one of those executive offices and have to make those important decisions. And of course, as a Black woman, what it may mean for Kamala Harris and for the rest of us to watch her do her thing. So we're pleased and delighted, I would say, that the Lieutenant Governor of Illinois, Juliana Stratton, has joined us this evening. For some of you who may not know her, she's had a wonderful public service career for a long time, focused on issues of criminal justice and other matters. And it was really a thrill for many of us when our Governor, J.B. Pritzker, selected her to be Lieutenant Governor. She's been busy ever since, and we appreciate the time she's spending with us today. And so we're going to jump right in, and I think we'll jump right in by my asking you, if you would, Juliana, to share with us your thoughts about the Harris election position, what it's going to mean, how you see it.
Well, good evening, everyone. And first and foremost, Rebecca and Kelly, thank you for inviting me to join you this evening for Vote Her In. This is, of course, an exciting time for women in politics. And in so many ways, and I know that your book is focused on the presidency, but we did vote her in to the vice presidency, and it's so exciting. You know, in this election, we saw the results of organizing and mobilizing Black Americans and really getting out the vote. And the powerhouse Black women in Georgia, like Stacey Abrams and Insay Ufod and Helen Butler and Deborah Scott and Tamika Atkins, and I could really go on and on with that list. They really carried on what I consider to be almost the often overlooked tradition of voting rights activism that has been led by Black women. And not only did they deliver Georgia, but and thereby the presidency for Joe Biden, but they also succeeded in electing two Democratic senators and flipping control of the Senate. So Black women did that. And history often forgets, like so many other achievements by Black Americans, that our activism has really helped shape politics in this country for over a century. And this election, of course, was likely the most consequential of our lifetimes, and it was Black women who made the difference. So I'm also so very excited, as you've referenced, to have a Black and Asian American woman as Vice President of the United States, and what this means for younger generations of women of color, like my daughters, my 4 daughters. But I know that Vice President Harris feels very strongly that it is our what I would say our responsibility, really, that we continue to keep the door wide open for those that are coming behind us. And I've just been what I consider to be like on cloud 9, from this election. But I think it's important for all of us to really take some time to slow down and pause and really reflect and process really what it means for us as women. But I also think that we can't lose sight of the work that we still have to do. I don't know if you all realize this, you probably do, but it was 49 years ago this week that Shirley Chisholm announced her presidential bid 49 years ago. And in that announcement, she said these words. She said, "I am not the candidate of Black America, although I am Black and I am proud." And she said, "I'm not the candidate of the women's movement, although I am also a woman and equally proud of that, but I am the candidate of the people." and my presence before you symbolizes a new era in American political history. So it took 49 years after Shirley Chisholm spoke those words to elect the first woman in the office of vice president. And I am really thrilled that we made it this far, but I can say it also means that we all recognize that we have so much farther to go. I always say that I love celebrating first. I was the first Black lieutenant governor in our state. I love celebrating first. That's great. But imagine the real joy when we are celebrating the many. And I think that's what all of us are working towards.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. And when you look at Kelly, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say when Kamala gave her speech right after they finally, were declared the winners by the media, and she said, "I may be the first, but I won't be the last." It was such a powerful moment to feel like, yes, we're going to keep this isn't the end, this is the beginning. So, the vice presidency has meant lots of different things. Different people have been different kinds of vice presidents, and there have been different kinds of relationships between the president and vice president. I've been heartened to see that everything coming out of the administration so far in this first week has been the Biden-Harris administration. The Biden-Harris administration, the VP is getting billing right up there. What do you hope that Kamala's role is? What sort of policy things are you hoping that she will focus on in this sort of really elevated position that she has?
Well, I mean, President Biden and Vice President Harris have really already outlined 4 urgent priorities that their administration will address. First and foremost, of course, getting past this COVID-19 pandemic. But secondly, rebuilding the economy. Thirdly, working toward racial equity. And fourth, combating climate change. And those are all it's a really big and ambitious and important list. And it makes sense that they have, so far at least, as you've mentioned, signaled focusing on these issues together, rather than Vice President Harris sort of working on her own policy portfolio. But Vice President Harris really brings an important perspective and voice to all of these issues. And her ability to be a strong partner to President Biden is really what made their ticket so strong and why it led to their success. In many of the interviews that I've seen, Vice President Harris has said that she hopes that she will really be Biden's Biden, of course, referring to the fact that she wants to be what now President Biden was to President Obama when he was known to challenge him privately, but remaining loyal to him, a loyal number 2 to him in public. And then, of course, President Biden, for his part, has said that Vice President Harris will be the last person in the room when any big decisions are being made. So quite frankly, with the extreme level of dysfunction that we have all had to endure over the last administration and the catastrophic consequences that have come along with that real dysfunction, I think it's just refreshing to me and to most Americans to see leaders who are genuinely concerned about for our country, concerned about the well-being of its citizens, and focused on that rather than just being focused on having the power. And I'm very confident that Vice President Harris will provide important input and guidance in this role, and that their commitment to work together on issues of policy is really precisely the kind of partnership that our country needs right now at the highest level to not only get things done, but to help us address this pandemic and get us through the point of recovery.
And just a quick follow-up question, and then another question for you. Were you whispering in the vice president's ear, in addition to those issues you mentioned that she's going to be working on with the president? What would you say to her about where you think she might well focus as a policy matter?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's about a specific policy issue. I mean, I think what she brings is her intellect and her brilliance, her perspective, her voice, her narrative, her lived experience. And I think what's important, as I say to all women who end up in positions of leadership, is that we have to bring our full and authentic selves into these spaces that we have not always been welcomed in. I mean, think about it. I've thought about this a lot. As Black women, the only time that we would often find ourselves in the White House for generations was if we were cleaning or serving or caring for someone's child. And now we have the most powerful woman in the nation that is a Black woman. So I don't think she has to decide this is the policy issue. I think she will bring with her her experience as a senator, as an attorney general, and throughout her life, her career. And she should bring all of that and make sure that she is inserting her very unique perspective into all policy matters.
So related to that, one of the other wonderful things that we can mark, or accomplishments we can mark now, is the rise of Black women to important positions in political life and government office all over the country. Particularly of interest to us here because we have been so focused on electing a woman president, electing a woman vice president, is women's rise to executive office. And of course, as you know, you're one of those people, but there are also a number of Black women mayors, in particular, running large and complex cities. And I wonder if you would share your thoughts with us about what it's like to be in one of those kinds of positions, whether you think there's anything in particular in that regard that relates to being a Black woman.
Well, it's exciting. It is incredibly exciting. I mean, we've made progress, and each election certainly demonstrates not only the power that we possess, not only just as candidates, but also as we think about the important voting block or the block of electorate that we are as Black women. Black women all over the country are rising up and are speaking truth to power. And we are bringing our expertise and our experience, kind of like what I've just talked about with Vice President Harris, where our predecessors oftentimes only brought money and connections. And so we have women that are making a real difference. Our brothers, our sisters, our allies recognize that Black women are the voice of the future. And when we run, we win. And when we win, we lead. And so it's important that we can continue to work together by volunteering to help these candidates, by supporting their campaigns, doing everything that we can to get out the vote. And we saw as a result of this last election cycle that we need to continue this work to keep moving forward. And I just want to say this, that when opportunities open up, it's important to be intentional about that space that is being made for Black women and making sure that they are being supported to run winning campaigns. As we know, there are so many people, and we can look historically where it might be popular at a time to give some lip service to supporting Black women, but it's important that it goes beyond lip service and that it is real actionable support of Black women that I think we've heard and we've seen that when there's so much hard work being done to get people elected, it's important to make sure that there's also that same reciprocal support when Black women themselves step up to run for these offices. So I think that that's kind of, what I think is really important, that we recognize the support that's needed, but also to make sure that there is real intention behind it.
Yeah, and I think seeing that very early can help. I mean, I've seen, as people have said they're not running for Senate or governor or whatever, and people start floating all the names, who's going to run, and it's always like this list of white men. we have to think early, very clearly about who we want to see in these roles, and make sure they have that space to do that.
Yeah, but can I just say something about that too, Kelly?
Mm-hmm.
This is not something that we often see as young girls thinking about what's possible moving forward. I mean, I can't think of a time that someone spoke to me as a student, even in college or as a young professional about, hey, have you ever thought about running for public office? I knew that there were elected officials, but it wasn't something that I saw. And I really would love to see more of an effort to introduce girls of color to the possibility of running for office. I mean, I think starting earlier to say, and it's not just running for office, because I also want to emphasize the idea of all the ways that we need people on campaigns. We need finance chairs, we need campaign managers, we need those working on marketing and communications, and so many other aspects of running a successful campaign. It's important to really work on making sure that people in all fields understand that this is something that's possible for you. And I've always said, as so many, you've heard the cliche that you can't be what you can't see. And so now so many young girls are seeing Vice President Harris in this role. And it's the first time we've seen a woman in that role. So it means that we are seeing what is possible. Young people are seeing what is possible. But we have to also let them know running for office can be for you too. And it's not a conversation anyone had with me. And I think I would love to see more of that. As I said before, as young people are considering their career paths, how can we also tell them, hey, this is something that you can do?
Yeah, definitely. So I want to ask about, as Lieutenant Governor, one of your priorities has been about criminal justice reform, police reform. It's something that is desperately needed right now, and you've played a real leadership role in this arena. Can you talk some about what your priorities are in that, what you'd like to see happen, and how we can really help ameliorate, especially the mistreatment, the discrimination against Black women, which is happening all over the country in really terrible ways?
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. I mean, as while I represent all residents of Illinois and am so honored to do so, I do bring my experience as a Black woman to this role, and this is an issue that has been particularly of interest to me. You know, I often talk about a story of a woman that I met who had been previously incarcerated, a Black woman. Her name was Maria, and she told me that I could share her story. After I heard it, it was just so powerful. I asked, could I share your words? And what she said to me is that I was in prison, and then I went to prison, and then I returned to prison. And what she was really talking about was the just the real trauma that she had experienced in her own community. Trauma is often what leads women to the justice system and incarceration. And she was talking about what she felt in her community that felt very similar to her experience of being in prison, which was also traumatic. And I'm not going to, by any means, suggest that that the trauma that Black women often feel in our society is related to prison. It is not. It is related to what happens to our young girls starting at early ages, as young as preschool. It is what happens to women in the workplace. It is what happens when women are not protected in so many ways. Think about the recent case of Anjanette Young, a woman that all of us saw on the news, who was standing there with no clothes on as 10, 11 officers came into her home on a bad tip, and she stood there really dehumanized and humiliated as she cried out 43 times, this is not my, you are in the wrong place. This is, you don't have the right home. You're in the wrong place. 43 times she yelled out, and she was never believed. And I'm grateful that we had the body cam coverage of that night and the footage of what happened. But the bottom line is, seeing that footage doesn't mean that it didn't happen. And it doesn't mean that it stops the trauma that Miss Young felt that night. And, you know, I think that, as I said, the criminalization of Black women really begins when we are girls. Black women and girls are often mischaracterized on how we dress and how we talk, or where we live and how we speak. All of these kinds of things are ways that we are stereotypes that we often have to overcome in our lives. And I want to be clear, it does not stop because you are elected to office. So overcoming these obstacles really begin when we are, it begins in our communities, it begins in our schools. And my hope is that the work that our administration is doing right now, including with our Justice, Equity, and Opportunity Initiative, which is housed in my office, Governor Pritzker has been an incredible leader on issues relating to criminal justice reform. Certainly, I want to lift up the leadership of the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus and the work that they are doing. But we need to make sure that this work, and I believe that it will, this work will have a lasting impact on communities that have been disproportionately harmed by our criminal justice system, so that Black people will have fewer obstacles to overcome. I want to just touch very briefly on something that our administration announced just last week as an example of this work, as a part of my chairing the Reinvest, Restore, and Renew Board. And I'm glad that we have the acronym R3. But through the R3 board, we distributed we awarded $31.5 million as one of the key equity goals that our administration has under the legalization of adult use cannabis. And this $31.5 million is going to be invested in communities that have been most harmed by the war on drugs, disproportionately Black and brown communities. And it's the first of its kind program like this in the nation. And I'm so honored that we had this first grant award. And the beauty of it is that it is embedded in the legislation. And so we will continue to give funding to these communities that have suffered from decades of disinvestment. You know, I always say that justice is never just about policing jails and prisons. Justice is about things like economic development and safe communities. Justice is about access to healthy and nutritious foods. It's about education and economic opportunity. So these are communities, again, primarily Black and brown, that have suffered from decades of disinvestment. Our office and the Justice, Equity, and Opportunity Initiative, in conjunction with the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority, really focused on this program, not just to invest funds, but to change the way that grant making is done in our state. We just had too many smaller organizations who are doing great work on the ground who said it's so hard to jump through the hoops or the bureaucracy of grant making. And so we really put equity right at the center. So this funding will go all across the state of Illinois. It will happen again next year, and it will fund things like violence prevention, reentry services, economic development, civil legal aid, and youth development. And as I said, it really changed the game and how grant making is done. And we hope that this will be a model for other states throughout the country. So I really hope right now that the work that we are doing is going to change the lives of the next generation and their children's children. I also hope that the things that we were protesting about this summer, all across not just the state of Illinois, but the world, I hope that that leads to real policy change, and that has already happened in Illinois. And I certainly hope that we can continue to create a more just and equitable world. And I hope that all Americans, regardless of their race, regardless of their gender, regardless of the community that they live in, can really have a real opportunity to see, because that's how we will move forward as a nation.
And speaking of having a real opportunity, perhaps, if you would, we will close this wonderful conversation with you by your sharing with us. What do you see as the kinds of opportunities, the kinds of activities that young women should seek to engage in as they, for instance, follow in your footsteps, in the footsteps of the Vice President, so that they too can be leaders in the public arena? We're not hearing her.
Oh, you froze and then unfrozen. I think you're muted now.
Okay. I was saying that I had I practice mindfulness meditation as one of the ways of addressing the stress of the job, and just as one of the ways to pause each day and spend a few minutes clearing my mind, because there's a lot rolling around in my mind. And I had this really amazing moment of guided meditation that talked about 3 questions to ask yourself as you think about the confidence that you need to move forward. And those 3 questions were: who are you? Where have you been? And what do you know? And what it really did for me is it made me just focus on the idea that we know things. We know things. We don't come to the table empty-handed. We know a lot. And we've been some places. We've had some real experiences in our lives that help us to be strong advocates for other people. I am a mother. I'm a wife. I am a daughter who cared for a mother with Alzheimer's. I am, the list can go on and on about who I am and what I know. And then I think of where I have been. Where have I been? What are the experiences that I've had through my life? There are so many inspiring women leaders today that are bringing their own experiences of who they are, what they know, and where they have been to their roles. And I think about, for example, recently elected Congresswoman Cori Bush, who was working as a triage nurse during the Ferguson riots. I think about, or the protests rather. I think about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who was working as a waitress, and she holds 2 degrees in international relations and economics. And I think about Illinois' own Congresswoman Lauren Underwood, who is also a nurse and who previously worked to implement the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. These are women who were elected to Congress not because of legacy or generational wealth or well-funded political machines. They were elected because they saw systems that were not working, and they wanted to put in the work to make the kind of change to these systems that were just greatly needed. And it's the same thing that we see with women in our respective roles all over the country, that we are in these positions of leadership. We are powerful, and we are often the best people for the job. So my advice is keep working in your communities. Make sure that you keep putting in the work in your professional lives and in the work that you do in the communities. Build your network. Never stop learning, and really just take advantage of some of the organizations that really focus on preparing women to run for elected office, and just kind of set your goals, set them high. We have now seen what is possible this last week, something we've never before in our lives seen as possible. It is now possible. So set high goals and keep working towards them. And remember that when women say, you know what, reach out to me. If I can be of help in any way, just reach out, make that call. Because I have too many young women who say, well, you're busy. I don't know. I feel like if I call, I'm bothering you. No, we want to help you. There's so many women upon whose shoulders I've had to stand to get to where I am. And my shoulders, I promise you, are firm because they are ready for the next woman to stand on these shoulders so that you can get where you need to go.
And, I will just say in closing, what you reminded me of while you were talking was I saw a little interview with Vice President Harris, in which she was kind of giving advice in the way that you have just been for us here. And she said, I eat no's for breakfast. And I thought that was really a great line about, to your point about, keep focused on your dreams, focus high, keep on moving. So thank you very much for joining us today. It was a treat to have you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Kelly. I had a lot of fun talking. Thanks so much.
All right, we'll be in touch.